Welcome to Theater Etiquette 101. We're learning about theater etiquette today. How lovely is that? Thank you. Yes. Okay, so what is theater etiquette? Theater etiquette is the phrase used to describe a set of rules and expected behaviors when you step inside an auditorium. Essentially, it is the proper way to behave in a theater setting. So we're going to be talking mostly about our theater setting, and there's going to be different expectations for different types of events that take place in there. The spirit assemblies would look different than going to High School Musical or going to our spring band or vocal ensemble concert. So we'll talk about those different types of events. Most of this would be for when you were coming to one of our school musicals, or if we brought in a group to perform like we did last week with Amira Miri. A lot of it can be used as well for other events like going to MBYO or MYO or Sistema. I know some of you are in those things or have connections to those things where you may go to them. Any event at, I shouldn't say any, many events at the Capitol as well, this would be useful for. Not really the same as if you go to a concert, like an outdoor concert or the Avenir Center. Those have some different components to it. But why is it important to learn about these expectations within a theater setting? By the way, there is a 12 question forms quiz about this afterwards, so make sure you're paying attention. I'm not trying to fool you in it or anything like that. It's just meant to make sure that you were sponging in all this wonderful information. It's all about making sure everybody has a good experience. The performers, all of the audience, including yourself. When I think of going to any high school musical, pretty soon I'll be going to see Moncton High's Mamma Mia. They've put in a ton of time, energy, money into their show, and so I want to be respectful and make sure that I don't take away from anybody's experience. So here are some of our tips for making good choices at these events. Number one, arrive early. It is rude and disrespectful to be late for a concert or a production. When you prioritize your time so that you can arrive early, it shows that you are respecting the performers and the other audience by not being disruptive and arriving late. Next, go tech-free. When you arrive, silence your phone. Turn the vibrator thing off too, and put it away, so that way you're distraction-free and you can enjoy the whole performance without any of these distractions, including just checking the time. The light can distract the people behind you. Even when you hide it under your thigh at assemblies and you're still scrolling in that way, and then just sliding your leg over it when a teacher walks by. Still disrespectful. Don't do that. Avoid photography and videography. Again, that would depend on some situations. I was at a concert at the Capitol in January or February, and at the beginning of the concert they said, you're more than welcome to take pictures. In fact, please tag us in all your pictures on Instagram. So since they were inviting us to, that's no problem. But if they don't tell you you can or you should, then you should avoid doing that because it might breach some copyright things. Or again, if somebody's doing this, it's really distracting or maybe blocking people's views. So you should avoid doing those things. Sometimes they even have somebody designated to film it or take pictures during it, and theirs probably are even going to be better than yours. So just connect with them later about it. Refrain from eating or drinking. This can be loud and disruptive. We've all probably been somewhere where it's like quiet and then you hear this crinkly wrapper start to unravel and it's so distracting and everybody turns and looks. And, Now, sometimes places will sell concessions. So if they're selling you the concession and they're allowing it in their theater, then that's different. But you shouldn't bring in your own food when other people aren't eating and becoming a disruption. Obviously, there's some exceptions, like if you're diabetic and you're about to go into a diabetic coma because your blood sugar is so low or something, like that's different. You might want to, in that case, test your blood sugar beforehand, make sure that you're at a good level so that you wouldn't be able to put yourself in that position. Be a good citizen, and any trash, put in the garbage on the way out. Leave the place as good or better than the way you found it. Engage. So when the performers invite you to participate, you should. If I went out to the edge of the stage to the audience and I was like, and nobody joined in, after like 5 or 6 of those with nobody joining in, I just want to melt into the floor and disappear. In those situations, join in. It makes the performers feel like you're a part, that you're contributing, that you're enjoying it, which is why they're doing it. They want you to enjoy it. Use the intermission or break time. So if you're going to something at the Capitol or going to see a musical or a show, very frequently there'll be a kind of halftime, an intermission, where you can go to the washroom, potentially purchase concessions. I know the lines are longer, there's more crowding during these times, but that's because that's when you're supposed to go. Make use of that time. Because you should remain in your seat for the duration of the performance. That is the proper etiquette. Truly, you shouldn't enter a performance after it's begun. In some venues, if you're late, you're not allowed to enter until intermission because it's rude and disrespectful and distracting to the performance and the audience. So a couple of examples for High School Musical, because that's the example that's most forefront in my brain from our production this year. We had school matinee, theater full of young students, and starting 15 minutes into the show, some of the kids started to go to the bathroom. And maybe some of them had to, or maybe some of them just needed to go for a walk, or wanted to move. But I found it really distracting, because where did they go? They would go down the steps, in some cases, walk right across in front of the show, and go out the main door. And every time that door would open, like light floods in, you can't help but look. Sometimes even the door might slam behind. So what could, say, in some cases a teacher went and escorted them with them. What could they have done to have had better theater etiquette if they absolutely had to escort a child to the bathroom? Instead of walking across down in front and going throughout this door and then just coming back in, what could they do? Jacob?
Did you want to spray?
Yeah, like how?
Like instead of like making our ruckus, finding maybe go in the door at the top of the auditorium instead and go to the washrooms upstairs.
True. Yeah. So finding a more discreet exit and entrance. Nice. Other ideas? So the other big one would be, especially in a musical where you have all these scene changes. If you re-enter, or if you're about to enter, you can listen at the door to see if you can hear what's going on. If there's just a little bit of dialogue, you might not be able to hear that. But if they're singing with the band, you'll be able to hear that. Or if the whole audience is applauding, you'll be able to hear that. So I had to leave during one of the shows for, I think there was some emergency backstage I had to deal with as the director. So I snuck out, and in the hall there was a lady, I think, changing her child's diaper, and she was about to go back in, but I was standing by the door, and I think she could kind of tell, like, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to re-enter. And I said, I'm just listening for applause for the end of this song. And when there's applause, then I can sneak back into my seat, because I won't be interrupting the action that's taking place on stage. So find a more discreet entrance or exit. Try to find your seat again discreetly during the applause of after a song has finished or during a scene change, something like that. But certainly never walking in front of the stage if at all possible. Again, sometimes things come up, medical emergencies or something like that, but generally speaking, really trying to be discreet. Of course, sitting in an upright position with your feet on the floor, trying not to disturb the seat and person in front of you. Some of you have much longer legs than me and they might touch the seat in front of you, so just being aware that every time you bump into that seat, it pushes somebody forward, and I'm sure you wouldn't appreciate that. Golden rule, do unto others, right, as you would want them to do to you. When I see students in the theater during a performance or a guest speaker slouched in their chair, looking like they're half asleep or actually trying to nap, even during that RBC presentation, it's extremely rude and disrespectful. Somebody has put themselves out there to be vulnerable and give a presentation or perform, and the least you can do is sit in an upright position and try to be as engaged as possible. I have been to stuff where I would have rather not have been there, but I was there for whatever reason, my job, or in university when I was doing my music degree, I had to go to some concerts of things that I wasn't really interested in, but I tried to find things that I could respect. Like, this isn't my genre of music, but wow, look how technically proficient they are, or I really enjoy their expression, or I can only imagine how many hours of work they put into doing this. What's something I can gain from this, or at least appreciate about it, right? So be a good audience member by looking like you're somewhat engaged. Remain quiet, don't talk during things. A little comment here or there isn't the end of the world if it's quietly whispered, and if it's something like, wow, that was amazing, But if it's a full-blown conversation about whatever, how much you hate it, or what you're gonna have for supper that night, or something else you'd rather be doing, it's not appropriate. Just be quiet. When is it appropriate to clap? So at the end of a scene in a musical or play, sometimes you have these little chapters of story and song, and then they might need to change the scene. It is appropriate to clap at the end of a scene. When the whole thing's over, when you're invited to. So last year, maybe you remember, vocal ensemble went around to the feeder schools, and one of the songs we did was Sweet Caroline, I think, at some of the schools. We did that here, one assembly, and the crowd started to clap along. What do you think? Appropriate or inappropriate?
Inappropriate.
Why do you think so, Jacob?
The performance wasn't over, and you didn't ask them to say, come on, let's go out together.
There you go, because they weren't invited to. Yeah.
Exactly.
So somebody mentioned that about one of the songs in the musical too. One person's argument was like, oh, but they were trying to show they were engaged. Like, yes, but they weren't invited to. During the musical, I think it was probably all in this together. The crowd starts clapping along, and the crowd isn't all musical. And they don't know how to maintain a proper tempo, which means they can throw off the band, they can throw off the performers. So although they're not trying to be malicious, they're trying to be supportive, it can actually do more harm than good. And in the case of Sweet Caroline, we found it distracting, and we were singing it a cappella with no band. So the whole crowd clapping actually tuned us out, and you could hardly hear us. So only clap along when you're invited to. This next point would require some judgment on your side of when it might be appropriate to do this. So I put this one in with this event in mind, but during High School Musical, Luna hit this note and sustained it for a really long time, kind of like an opera singer. And in 2 or 3 of the 5 shows, the audience applauded her, like mid-song. They just applauded her. And in this situation, it worked. It was okay because the band could pause and then continue. Otherwise, it could be kind of rude to do that because it would cut off the next people doing their solos, and then you wouldn't hear their solos, right? So if you know a show really well or what's about to happen, and it can be more helpful than harmful, then that's okay. During the bows of a show, you should clap for the full duration. Even if it's people you don't know, you should be clapping for them. And you can even stand and give them a standing ovation. That's usually fairly routine, particularly at the end of a musical or play. In classical work, there's a couple of other rules with clapping that I'll just point out because maybe you'll be at a classical concert someday and it'd be helpful for you. But in classical music, sometimes we have these things called works with different sections, thinking of it almost like a book. So for example, this book would be called Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 in C minor, but then it has different chapters called movements. And in classical music, it's actually disrespectful to clap in between the movements. So when the first movement's over, it's like silent, and then they continue the next movement, and then continue until the last movement, and when the whole thing's done at the end of the last movement, then you would clap. And that was something that was new to me when I was in music school, because I didn't have a lot of experience with classical music previously. And at the end of the first movement of something, I went to clap. I just lifted my hands up, and my friend who was with me was like, "Don't clap." I'm like, why? They did wonderfully. Yeah, I know, but you don't clap in between movements. Okay. Didn't know. Now I know. It's just kind of one of the funny little tradition rules about classical music. Another one, I don't know if you're familiar with Handel's Messiah and the famous Hallelujah chorus. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Anyway, so fun classical tradition with that song is when the Handel's Messiah Hallelujah chorus starts, the audience is supposed to stand in ovation. Just another one of those classical music traditions where you're supposed to stand because it's supposed to be, well, legend has it that in the 1700s the king stood because he was so moved by the music, and when the king stands, the people stand. And so it kind of continued on. All right, back to here. I think that's about it. Thank you for applying this knowledge in the future.